Hello, everyone, and welcome to Migrant Munch. My name is Dr. Sharika Senamiratna, and I'll be your host on this podcast. Migrant Munch is a platform for people from migrant backgrounds to come together and talk about their stories. Let's dive into today's story. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Migrant Munch. We've got Sarah here today, a very special guest. So I'll hand over to Sarah now to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Sarah Arachchi. I'm a pediatrician from Melbourne, and I'm also an author of this book, Brown Female Doctor. So lovely to be here today with you, Sharika.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks for showing us the book as well. I'm very, very excited to get into the book and what inspired it. I've ordered the book and I'm waiting for my copy. Can't wait to get into it. So maybe we'll start by you telling us about the book. Tell us what inspired the book and what's the story.
Yeah, so the book Brown Female Doctor. So that's the way that I've used to describe myself as a brown female doctor. And essentially, it's a story about migration initially to Australia, and then the challenges that I've faced as a person of colour, as a child, and then going into other aspects of my life. And then becoming a doctor, going through medical school and the journey of that medical school, as well as then becoming a paediatrician, and the challenges and joys of that journey. So I do talk a lot about culture and the importance of family and place throughout the story. And I think that a lot of people who have migrated to Australia from other countries would be able to relate, or if they have a parent who has migrated to Australia from another country, would also be able to relate to a lot of the themes that run throughout the story.
Yeah, right.
I think that a lot of people would resonate with some of the challenges that I faced. So we moved to Australia in 1990, which was, just a little bit after the civil war erupted in Sri Lanka. And my parents moved here. We moved here with my parents on a skilled migration visa. We had a good life in Sri Lanka, I've been told. And, I remember a country that, was warm, and I had all my relatives there and full of that sense of belonging. And then coming to a country which was cold, and it was in the middle of winter that we moved here. So that was really challenging as a young child, right? So for me as a young child, I guess back in 1990, there was not a lot of brown people in Australia. And so it was really challenging being one of the only brown kids in my whole school. Like, a lot of people would find that difficult to relate to because it's not as common now for that to happen. For our family, it was a new place, new experience, new everything. We didn't have phones, we didn't have the internet. So it was a very different time. It was a very, very different time.
And you're so right. Like, it is common now, but I can't even imagine how you would have felt as a young kid coming in not only from like tropical humid weather to this cold Melbourne weather that we're in right now. Yeah, that would have been quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like at the time as a child, you don't know any different, right? So you follow your parents wherever they have to take you. And so I think for me, I didn't know any different except that I was different. So that was pointed out to me from a very young age, that I was different to everybody else. And why was I different? It was because of the color of my skin. And that was so I endured like so many like taunts in the playground from a young age, and I just had to put up with it. I mean, I didn't tell the teacher. I didn't even tell my parents. I just dealt with it. I just kind of, came up with my own way of finding friends and people who saw me for who I was. And like, it wasn't just me, my friends as well. Like, so we had a lot of family friends. We knew like what it was like to be, one of the only brown kids in the whole class. And so we kind of understood it, but we didn't really talk about, I guess, the impact of it. Or it was only more recently now, when people are talking about diversity and the importance of these kinds of things, that you realise what we went through back then was not okay. coming to a new country and learning to blend in with bringing your traditions and your cultures. You share that in your home, you find people that you connect with. So, my parents had a lot of family friends that they would interact with. And I think for me, that was important as a child because it really did hone in that sense of culture.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things I learned was because of my parents about our culture. So they tried to preserve that. I wasn't very good at it, but I went to Sri Lankan Saturday school.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I had a really beautiful teacher, and she, she was great with what she did in terms of teaching us. And so I learned a little bit about how to read in Sinhalese and write in Sinhalese as well, but I'm not very good at it. But I did learn, and I learned to speak Sinhalese because of my grandparents who'd come and visit us. And
Yeah.
so these things are things that I learned because my parents made sure that we continued to appreciate the culture that we had from Sri Lanka. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I was getting an education of the Australian landscape in the school. And so then I guess there is that sensation of like being, Australian or becoming Australian as well, which is sometimes difficult for people to comprehend. So I guess it's a little bit different if you move to Australia as an adult
Yeah.
or as a teenager. But for me, because it was like an evolving process, it was something that I just, like, I was learning to become both.
Yeah.
Like, you were someone at home with your parents, and then you were someone at school with your friends. And so in different environments you just adapted and behaved as you were supposed to. So in school I was, a different, not a different person, but I just had to blend in. And then at
Yeah.
home, I found that with, family friends and so forth, like it was a different sensation of like sort of family, because you had to make your own family here because our
Mm.
family was back in Sri Lanka. Yes, my grandparents would come and visit, but it was if they would visit, they wouldn't like stay for huge extended periods of time. And so there was always that sensation that you missed your family back home, and it becomes part of your identity is that you are Sri Lankan, but you're also Australian as well.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of somewhere in the middle. I think the hardest thing for me though was when I would go back to Sri Lanka, and then when I'd see my family, my grandmas and my relatives, and then there's always that sense of closeness. So the way I relate to that specifically is, so Christine Anu has remade the song My Island Home. And so
Hmm.
that song resonates with me, not just with Sri Lanka, but Australia is not really an island, but it kind of is because we're surrounded by ocean. So it's like both of them, I resonate with that song in both here and in Sri Lanka. And I guess the hard thing was when I go back to Sri Lanka, they look at you and they're like, not my family, but random people. And they're like,
Mm.
where are you from? Like, you don't belong in Sri Lanka there because you're not like the Sri Lankan people that grow up in Sri Lanka, because I am different to that.
Yeah. How do you navigate that?
I try really hard to pretend, and I've even like, it's you're seen as a foreigner. It's so like
Yeah.
I find it hard. Like I've been, even when you go to Sigiriya, right? I climb the
Mm.
rock, try and go and get I'm not a local, but I'm like, I try and speak in Sinhalese, and their police officers like, go to the foreign line. You
Yeah.
need to go to the foreign line. You're not from here. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's kind of, yeah, they look at you differently, and it's hard, and it's not,
Yeah.
it's just, it's, yeah. So you learn from a very young age. Like when we went back to Sri Lanka for the first time when I was about 8 or 9 years old,
Hmm.
people were staring at me, children were staring at me, women were staring, other people would stare at us because I looked different. Like they know straight away how you dress, how you walk, how you talk, everything's different.
Wow.
And already you realize that you don't belong there. So that's hard. I think that's harder. The fact that when you go back to Sri Lanka and you're like seen as a foreigner, that for me is harder. Like my parents, they don't have that issue because they were already adults when they moved to
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah.
So, and they have their family and they have their friends, they have people there. like my mum's got all her high school friends, my dad's got his uni friends. So they've got people that they go and hang out with over there. I don't have those friends in Sri Lanka. I have some friends that I've met here that have gone back to Sri Lanka, but I don't have those friends there.
Thing. I was just thinking when you were talking about that, like, it's only been 10 years since I moved to Australia, but there are days when even I feel like, oh, I don't feel like I belong here anymore. Like, it just feels weird. And it's so interesting to hear you say that and you resonate with that.
When I'm there, like it's just like this is so cool. Like I love the culture, I love the food, I love the people, I love the
Yeah.
place. Like it's so different to Australia, right? And so when I go to Sri Lanka, it's really cool. But I know I could never live there because
Mm.
I've grown up in a different type of society where my values reflect what I've learned in Australian society. I can speak the language, but I can't write properly and I can't read properly. And so it's not possible for me to probably live and work there, for example,
Mm.
right? So it's, yeah, different mindset. But I love the place. Like Sri Lanka is a beautiful country and people know that. People that have traveled to Sri Lanka, they know that, right? But I think, yeah, you need to understand your roots in order to sort of form that sensation of your cultural identity. So there's a book called Looking for Alibrandi that I read when I was in year 10, year
Mhm.
9 or year 10, which is a story about a girl of Italian background who grew up in Australia. And in that book, she describes that sensation of feeling lost between like being not Italian enough or not being Australian enough. And I read that story when I was in year 9 or year 10, and I was like, this is me. This is what I'm going through right now. This is what I've gone through my whole life. This is how I feel. So I could really relate to that story. And my book is basically looking for Alibrandi in Scrubs.
Yeah. So talk to me about that now. Let's dive into
Like
that.
teenage years are hard for everybody, right?
Yep.
And you get a lot of pressure from different places and different fields to become a certain type of person, whatever. So I went to a girls' school, which was great. So I always believed that I could be anything I wanted to be, anyone I wanted to be, because of the fact that I went to a girls' school and they very much emulated that. Um, and then when I went into medical school, it was a real kind of shock to the system when I realized that people had preconceived ideas of women
Mm.
and where women belonged or where women didn't belong. And I've heard comments when I was in medical school, not from the school itself, but just from other people that,
Yeah.
oh, if you're going to be a female doctor, how are you going to balance that with your life, your career, your family, your this? I hadn't even had children at that point. I was like 18 or 19 when I entered medical school. I hadn't even thought about these things. So it's like you get into medicine, and then within medicine, it's like this career is better for people who want to have kids or people, and so you hear
Mm.
these things when you're going through medicine. And that's the part where, like, for me, I was a bit shocked because I never actually thought that any of these, I never had these thoughts that because I was a woman, I had to do a specific type of specialty or I had to go into a particular type of field or anything like that. But there's hints of that from different people who you meet.
Yeah, wow. And how did you navigate that then? Because that sounds really tough.
So I did go into a female dominated profession, but that's because I wanted to be a pediatrician from the beginning.
Yep.
And I was lucky in that way because then I was exposed to female role models and people who had children, and that's what I wanted later on in life. So for me, it was okay. But when I did do certain specialties or rotations as a medical student, surgery, for example, I was exposed to a very male driven hospital environment in those settings. And that was really challenging as a woman having to deal with these attitudes,
Yeah.
very outdated. And remember, like, this is going back, over 15, 16 years ago.
Mm.
And I think, like, because we are talking about these issues, I mean, I
Mm.
wrote a book about my whole life, right? People are becoming more aware of these issues and workplaces are changing that it's a bit more equitable for everybody.
Yeah. And that really shows you the power of speaking up, right? If someone's actually pushing through without staying silent, obviously someone's done that, or a group of women have finally done that, and now it's like changing the culture of medicine, which is great for the people coming in now.
Yes, for sure. I think so. I think, like, yeah, the more that we speak about the challenges that we face. And it's not just in medicine. It's
Mm.
so when I tell people my story, they will say, "Oh, this happens in law. This happens in, engineering and other
Yeah.
fields." So it's not necessarily related just to medicine. I think if you look at the media landscape, it's similar challenges there. There's not a lot of diversity and representation. There is now. It's heading. They're trying to increase diversity in those spaces, which they
Yeah.
should. Yeah. But it takes time to get there.
Mm.
I think, like for someone like me, I felt like I've had to work twice as hard to be
Mm.
recognized for the things that I've done. Um, if you always feel like you're never good enough and that you always have to continue to do a lot more than what you're doing. Perhaps I learned that from my parents in the sense that they would do a lot of community service. So my dad was given an Order of Australia for the community service that he's done to the Sri
Oh.
Lankan community. And he did that. He wasn't paid for any of it. It was all voluntary. And so I guess for me, I learned that from my parents that you do things to help better the community, to make a contribution to the community. So that's always been the heart of why I chose to enter medicine, was to try and make a difference to the community in where I lived. I think part of the reason why I wrote this story was to inspire other people to, don't give up,
Yeah.
and you got to try and find your cause, and don't forget about your community and your values and your people. You shouldn't let go of that because it's part of who you are.
And it's a big part of a beautiful culture. Like
Yeah.
you're part of a beautiful culture that is worth preserving.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, like for me, it's worked in a positive way. So, in the sense that when I look after my patients, I try and make sure that my practice is more culturally safe. And I think, like, if I see someone of similar cultural background to me, they automatically relax most of the time. And when I see children who come and tell me that they are facing problems like I faced, that makes me sad. And I have heard those stories, children as young as, 5 or 6 coming and telling me they got called names because they were brown.
Wow. And what's it like then bringing up your kids now in a culture in Australia? Because that must be a challenge in itself now.
Well, because of the challenges that I've had, I've
Yeah.
educated my children to be embrace their diversity and their culture. My husband is Indian background,
Hmm.
so they have two cultures that they can learn, as well as this, well, three if you include the Australian culture. And there is a concept that I came across when I was writing my book, and something that really validated my experiences. It was called being a cross-cultural kid.
Hmm.
And that's sort of where you have, developed an identity, which is where you sort of submerge all your cultures to become this person that's a cross-culture kid. So initially, it was called, I think, Third Culture Kid. Originally, there was a sociologist called Ruth Useem, and she originally coined the term third culture kid to describe people who migrated to, say, Dubai, for example, from, we'll just pick a country, the USA, and then they're integrating their culture whilst learning in another country. And that's sort of where it came about. And then this term, cross culture kid, so it was Ruth Van Recken who then coined the term cross cultural kid, which describes sort of, bringing all your cultures together and becoming this person that embraces all of them, and that
Yeah.
forms a different identity. I see my kids as that too, but they understand what it means to be different to some of their peers, but they love the fact that they're, brown kids. They love it.
Yeah.
I hear my older son one time educating the younger son about the importance of diversity, and I was like, yes. And he was only like 8 when he was having that conversation with the younger one,
Yeah.
because he's heard me talk about this before. That's important because like, you need to be accepting of people of their different backgrounds,
Yeah.
because in medicine we're taught that you cannot have a bias towards any particular anyone's backgrounds. You can't be judgmental or anything like that. So whilst I was taught that, I also had an education like in this country, where I was exposed to other other cultures and other backgrounds.
The fact that you've had the lived experience of being on the other side, having to navigate differences in cultures has brought that in you or brought that upon you to kind of see people as human and not for where they come from or what they bring to the table or how they portray themselves. And that's beautiful.
And that only comes with having conversations with people who don't look like you. I had friends from different cultural backgrounds, and they were like, and we saw each other as friends. We didn't look at, yes, my friends might be like, bring some food and we try it out and be like, oh, this is really cool. And so you get exposed to different people's cultures, yes. But it only helps you to appreciate that more.
Yeah.
So when I go back to Sri Lanka before, when I was a kid, sometimes you see that there's colorism in, like when I went to Sri Lanka, like, oh, you're too dark. Like when I had my homecoming in Sri Lanka, this lady came to put, I went to a person that we paid for. She was putting my makeup on, and then she started putting the makeup on the neck, and then she started doing my arm. And I actually said, stop. I don't like this, because I didn't like that she was trying to make me look like someone that I wasn't. So I went home, I went to the hotel, I took everything off. And I had my makeup bag that I'd brought on the holiday, and I applied my own makeup. I was like, I don't want to look like shade of skin. And I have had comments because my mum is quite fair. My father is, a little bit darker than my mum. And so I've had comments based on how dark I am when I'm in Sri Lanka. Like you would probably know, the first thing they say is, oh, you're too dark, or you're too light, or you look really nice because you're really light. And it's like all these fair and lovely creams in the country that people um, you know, are displaying in these shops that you're supposed to buy. And where did this come from? That beauty is how light you are. And then again, you go to Sri Lanka, there's colorism there. It's quite rife there. So it's not just in Australia. It's ultimately underneath all of the melanin that we carry, the facial features, we're all human.
Wow, this is so true and so obvious, but it all honestly frustrates me that people just don't see it that way. It's like, yeah, is racism isn't just in a new country. It could be in your own country. There's always going to be someone saying something to kind of make you feel less confident in your own self.
Absolutely. And, going back to the fact is that we are human. When I was a medical student, we had to do dissections on people who had donated their bodies for science. And when you dissect these cadavers, is the term that we use to describe them. Everybody has the same heart and lungs, and yes, they're slightly different sizes, but we're all human. You got to look internally. If you're struggling to deal with other people, you have to sort of look at yourself as well. Yeah. Yeah. And where can you grow, and like go and have a conversation with someone that is different, just like someone from your workplace that you might not normally have a conversation with, and try and get to know them. And then perhaps you'll learn a little bit about them. The other thing is that when your kids have partners one day, they may not find someone who is of a similar cultural background to you. And that's something that, my parents had to go through with me. Luckily, my husband, for them, he was Indian background, so it wasn't that different. But it's again a new process for parents when their kids meet other people, and they have to be quite open and understanding that you've moved to a different country, so you can't expect everybody to be the same, and whoever you find is whoever you find, and that's something, as long as they're a good person. And so I think, yeah, you just learn to respect people and culture and all of those things that are important in making us who we are.
Yeah, you've got to be open to those experiences and you've got to be able to actually put yourself in other people's shoes. I guess those preconceived beliefs about things. You need to
Mm.
kind of step away from those and have a bit of an open mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been absolutely great having you on the podcast. I'm very excited myself to read your book.
Thank
And
you.
this podcast has inspired a lot of people to buy your book as well, because I think it is a very important story about all the challenges that you faced and how to navigate those. And you've no doubt talked so authentically about your experience of coming to Australia as a young kid and how you've grown up and having to kind of understand the two cultures and how to bring them together. And it seems like you're doing amazingly. So yeah, kudos to you on that.
Yeah, trying to do that. And I think, like, Yeah, if you want to buy my book, it's available in all the major bookstores. So, Readings in Chadstone has copies. If you want to go and physically buy the copy, Amazon, and also on the Monash University Publishing website, and Jeffrey's in Malvern if you live close to there. So it's available in all major bookstores, but Amazon as well, and it ships to your house. So yeah, please share it with your family and friends, and I hope that it brings some joy in reading my story and being able to share, your story.
Thanks, Sarah. And everyone, go buy the book. I'm sure, yeah, there's a lot of stories in there that'll inspire you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Migrant Munch. If you really liked what you heard today, reach out to us, get in touch. Tell us what really inspired you, and we'd love to connect with you and hear more about your story.